So yes, I'm looking at training needs from an industry perspective, but as I said, I'll probably be covering and reinforcing some of the messages that we've already heard this morning here. So we're all stakeholders in the industry. I mean, we predominantly are manufacturers, Saint-Gobain as manufacturers, but all of us that sit in this room here are stakeholders within the industry, whether we're trades, system installers, whether we're consultants, architecturally, engineers, energy assessors, or whether we form part of the supply chain as merchants and manufacturing. If we're going to achieve our targets, our goals, our aspirations, the industry needs to move forward with a joined up approach. So where do we fit in? Saint-Gobain globally are a huge multinational organisation that I think is one of the, I think we can claim to build a building from footings to roof and supply all the materials. But within Ireland, we're Gyprock, we're Isva, we're Weber. Significant heritage, 75 years or 75 years plus, plasterboards and plasters, but Isva insulations, air tightness solutions, and Weber industrial mortars. So we fit into the building fabric, the construction fabric sector of the build, and we employ within Ireland in excess of 800 people. So what we're going to do is just put a few things into context, look at the legislation, the direction that the building regulations have taken, look at the demand and the opportunity, some of the requirements for learning, and then a very quick case study in there, and then we'll just review the slides. But in terms of the context, see the moves within legislation and strategy is changing our expectations effectively to reduce energy and CO2 consumption, but ultimately to improve the quality of our building stock. But we need to gain that motivation for change. It's not just a case of putting it into writing. We need to build that motivation for change, and ultimately we need to get our audience, whether it be the merchant, the contractor, the end user, the architect, we need to get them to understand the value of these new levels and standards within construction. So we need to create demand, and then once we've gained acceptance, we need to meet it with the supply in terms of product, training. So the requirements, I mean, we've covered, Mark has covered a lot of these. We've seen changes in many of the building regulations and directives over the last few years, but the pace has actually been quite fast in relative to, if we look back in history, we've actually been moving at quite a pace. And we've now got increases in auditing and building control, and I think maybe that's one of the underlining issues within this. We can all talk about the standards and what we should be achieving, but it's actually offering some control around that and actually getting the level of competence up so that we can say, yes, we've actually achieved that. But with these requirements, we actually open up opportunities. I mean, we're talking about what we need to meet, but the opportunities are to provide nearly zero energy buildings, 2015, somewhere between 2013 and 2016. SEAI targets to retrofit 1 million homes by 2020, and the renovation of 3% of government buildings per year. These are quite ambitious targets, but they all need to fit in with the framework of the requirements. So we look at the national challenges. We've got these 20% reduction in energy use for 2020. We've got changes in EU targets. We want to build up our employment, and we want to reduce the social welfare costs. What we want to bring is benefits to the end user, to the homeowner, to the building occupants, high quality end product, health benefits, and energy savings. So there's significant challenges in achieving these performance standards and reduced tolerances for error, because we are introducing levels of control, which is where we need to look at training. This is where we need to bring in training. And what do we need to train in? You know, I suppose you're looking at me as a manufacturer, and you could argue, well, he has a vested interest in training in the use of his particular product or his particular system. But we've already covered it. We need a broader training than that, and we try and engage within that training at that broader level. So we need the industry from bottom to top to understand the theory of best practice. As part of Saint-Gobain, we have a concept called the multi-comfort house, which is not too far removed from passive house. It's looking at the design just beyond the elements. I mean, if we go back a few years, we would have been in this area here of the insulated buildings, and we would have been looking at the thermal, acoustic and fire properties of each of the individual elements. We're now really into a position where we're looking at this yellow area here, this global energy efficient building, where we start to try and bring the benefits of, or bring the performance characteristics of those elements together, looking at air tightness, look at the effects that it has on moisture management, and look at the comfort situation in the home. But ultimately we want to get to here, this sustainable build, you know, this improvement of comfort and the quality of the environment that we live in, reducing the waste and having the benefit of the whole life costs of the building. So we're looking at a high quality, comfortable build environment where materials fit for purpose and fit for the length of the building that they're built within. And I suppose the framework around this is we're looking at Trias Energetica, which is, why would we put lots of money into a sieve? Because it's just going to leak out of the bottom. So first steps is to reduce the demand of energy that we need to put in the building. So we look at the building fabric, we avoid waste, we save energy. We then look at the fuels that we use to heat that building. We've created a building that contains the heat efficiently, but we then look at the fuels within it. And the appliances we put in that building need to run efficiently as possible. And they bring, when we achieve all that, we achieve thermal comfort, but we get all these other additional benefits too as well. We get acoustic comfort, visual comfort, air quality, etc. And then the bottom one there is perhaps the most important one. And that's applicable to new build and retrofit. And we're looking at essentially a fabric first approach. And this is almost a revisit of one of your slides here, Joseph. But if we look at how we've actually evolved in trying to meet regulations since 2005. We had a set of building regulations in 2005 which gave us overall energy consumption or energy performance coefficient. We looked at 40% improvements in standards when we moved into 2007, and we did that by putting in a benchmark target for air tightness, introducing renewables and putting in benchmark efficiency for boiler efficiency. Now as we move to 2011 with another 33% improvement over 2007, how are we actually achieving that when we look at the building regulations? Essentially it's the contractor that looks at the building regulations and he reads it line for line in black and white, and he sees, I now need a boiler efficiency with an improved 90%, I now need to achieve better levels of air tightness, and I need to bring my U values down. But if we do those measures and if we read it line for line, these are just backstop values. There's actually a gap, there's a void between what you actually read and what you actually need to achieve in terms of it's about building to the holistic, it's a holistic building. So we need to exceed those standards, we need to build beyond these backstops, and we need to educate the construction industry that that's what they actually need to do. We can take a template and it's not the be-all and end-all, but people understand the term passive house. You know, the basic principles, we gain the benefits from the solar energy by the orientation, the shape, the placement of glazing of the building, and so we manage the overheating. So it's a fabric first approach. And if we look at the requirements, rough, again, these are just very general figures, but typical U values of 0.1 to 0.5, these are well beyond, with the exception of perhaps the roofs, but essentially these are well beyond the standards that we see written in the documentation. Air tightness levels of 0.6, not 7, 0.6, which allows us, once we get the fabric right, which allows us to bring the annual space heating demand down. in reality, we're actually there. We're 60 kilowatt hours per metre squared. That's the requirement within the building regulation. So we're not too far off now as a standard, but as we've already highlighted, the reality is we're probably building somewhere back up here in terms of compliance. And the reality is, as we move forward and the next revision of the building regulations, we're going to be here, which is essentially, if we want to align it with something that we recognise is virtually passive house standard. So that's covering just the basics. That's, what do people need to achieve? And then the issues around that. I mean, as insulation suppliers, obviously we engage with U-value calculations and the placement of insulation within the building. But we need our installers, our contractors, our designers to understand the basic theory around how to maintain this continuity of insulation around the building, whether they place it internally within the cavity or externally, or whether on their choice of materials, whether they use foams, minerals, naturals, or new technologies. And the same can be said for air tightness as well. There's many approaches to air tightness. We can look at the materials that actually build the structure. We can look at membranes. We can look at plasters and renders to actually seal up the fabric. But it's about maintaining this continuity of air tightness around. Now that's the simple message, but in reality, as we move forward with these standards, we actually have to consider vapor control. We probably got away with it in the past, and contractors said, I didn't have a problem with that in the past. It never really affected me. We were building leaky buildings. Now, as we start to build tighter, moisture management within a building starts to become more important, and we need to manage these condensation risks that we could potentially create long term, and the durability of the building is vastly reduced because we're building essentially unsafe and potentially unhealthy buildings. And we need to look at the way that we build. We want to eliminate thermal bridging or cold bridging, thermal bypasses. We want to maintain this continuity of retaining the heat throughout the building. And it's not just a paper exercise. It's all very well me standing up here and the designer talking about it. It's the installers, the contractors that need to understand that it must be installed properly. This is just one example and one photo of many that can be shown up. I'm putting in X amount of insulation, I've got my U value. Not if it's installed like that, you haven't. And the implications of what actually is going on when we do things wrong, thermal bypassing, air looping within cavities, the contractor needs maybe a basic understanding of, if I do this wrong, what problems could I actually be causing down the road? And what we haven't had in the past, and I suppose this is to a certain extent was a wish list, is a wish list, but hopefully is becoming more reality. Mistakes have been made quite prominently whilst we're talking about energy, but I mean, if we relate it, these are all building control issues. I mean, if we look at Priory Hall and fire, but on a daily basis, we build in cold bridges into our constructions without even thinking about it. But there is going to be amendments to building control. Last we heard is that the Minister for Environment wants to sign off these regulations in the very short future to look at design certification and then undertakings by not just the designer but also by the builder and the owner, and a full completion certificate developed under a code of practice and a certification for contractors, which will lead to an increased burden of proof onto the people that install the systems within our buildings, whether it becomes from an air tightness view, so we will start to use accredited details potentially, or prove that what we're building actually complies and meets what we have as a paper exercise, actually meets it in reality. And this increased monitoring on site should improve the standards of building, but we won't get there without training. Now, as manufacturers, as suppliers to the industry, we already engage in a huge amount of work. We test our systems, we prove our systems work, whether it be from a thermal point of view, acoustically, or from a fire point of view, we go through and we engage in this level of product and system testing. And we get accreditation from recognised bodies that these systems work in application. But we need to take it one step further. We need certified installers, and we need certified installers under recognised programs so that they're competent enough to sign off on their installations at the end of the day, and that the end user has the confidence that what he's actually signed off is correct. And the challenges that it brings, it means that the installers need to understand the implications of, in a thermal context, continuity of insulation, thermal bridging, air tightness, and the same sort of issues for acoustic and fire performance as well, in terms of acoustic bridging and fire-rated constructions, the impact of actually not detailing exactly as we prescribe, because when we test to a certain system, it needs to be built like that. So what have we done, and what are we trying to do to engage within this training program for the industry? In 2010, we opened up a training technical academy in King's Court. The academy is actually just to the southern side of the Cavan border in Meath. But we offer dedicated training, short training days in terms of renovation solutions, air tightness, the installation of internal and external insulation. And when it comes to external insulation, we actually can work under a framework of NSAI certification. And we've had 1,350, in excess of 1,350 through the academy since 2010. In terms of courses that are directly related to energy, we're probably looking at 800 people. And we don't just engage in the how to install our system. We give them a broad knowledge of the theory, what they actually need to be reading, what they need to understand in terms of the regulations, why they need to understand it, how they put it into practice, and the repercussions that it could have on the building itself if they don't install it correctly. But I suppose that's what we're trying to do. The level of frustration is, where does it get recognised in the industry? We send them away with a certificate saying that they've been trained in our system, and we only get them for a short period of time. And Mark's touched on, and Joseph has touched on, the requirement to train contractors and installers. Through experience, there's a huge fear factor about getting back into a classroom. And one of the benefits that we can do as manufacturers is we can engage them because they're actually training in our systems. But we can give them the background knowledge to what they need to understand before we actually engage them at that level, so they can understand the implications of why. I mean, we have a huge level of sign-up, but we have a much lower level of attendance in terms of people actually making it to the building because I have a job that's just come up. It's more important to attend that. We don't charge for our courses. This is free. We have a vested interest in it in ourselves. But our global ambition is that we build better buildings in the future. It's not just from a manufacturer's perspective. So we are trying to offer those educational benefits. So it's how we sit within this national framework of education. And training and skills, some of it knowledge, some of it skills based, and some of it being about being competent when they actually get onto site. We train from a classroom perspective, and we train from a practical perspective. We can look at how our products and systems are used in application, and it's not difficult. I mean, if we look at the standards and actually trying to achieve low energy buildings, the technologies are already there. It's just about being applied effectively. So, I mean, just as an example, we engaged in the product in Tullow there between the end of 2010 through 2011, and using a range of products that we supply, plasters, insulation, to maintain continuity of insulation around the building, maintaining vapor check and air tightness around the building, and with robust finishing renders, we achieve very high standards of a virtually nearly zero energy building. So just to recap, why are we doing this again? Let's reflect on the challenge. But is it a challenge or is it an opportunity? We've got this carrot dangling in front of us of, depending on the way that the economy goes, of a million homes by 2020 and the renovation of 3% of government buildings per year. So there's contractor benefits to upskilling, increasing activity, sustainable business and recognition. Those people that are recognised as the good guys gain recognition within their local working area. And much of the people, when we talk about retrofit work, they gain their work on reputation, local reputation. And if they've got the edge over the next guy, they'll jump at it. But it's having that recognition. Homeowner benefits, they've got recognition. The homeowner ends up getting confidence. He gets a higher quality build, he gets the health and he gets the energy savings. And it all comes back to, we're doing this on a larger scale. Joseph touched on this, even if it's Mr. and Mrs. McCarthy, you know, it actually has a larger scale benefit on the reduced national debt, secure energy and environmental protection for a long term. And this is all of us. This is us. This is going to help us all, and this is going to help engage us all in the industry. So that's me. I covered a lot of ground that we've already seen there before, but I suppose the message is we need that training. We see it from an industry perspective because our reputation relies on our systems working properly. And if they're not installed properly, they're not going to work properly. Thanks very much.